Susanne, welcome
Hello,
to the show.
Miriam. Thank you.
After having you have blah, 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 blah. After having spent so much time with you, I'd never done before, and seeing you facilitate, I am super excited about this conversation today. Playing with intent.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Miriam. So fun.
Yes, and before we get into the deep dive, when did you start calling yourself a facilitator? And actually, do you?
I actually do. So that's the probably the easier answer. I actually do. I think that was pretty much from the start, to be honest, because I did a training on the Theory U by Otto Scharmer, and that training was called Facilitation for Change, or for I don't know what it was kind of the end, but I know it was Facilitation for. So and they called us facilitators, so I called myself facilitator. So I think it was really kind of right from the start, and it's interesting that you asked that question, and also that it's being discussed in the NDB community, because I never doubt that kind of, how can you call yourself differently? So yes, I would call myself a facilitator for culture and change. Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Yeah, the conversation is always fascinating. And I recently heard a sentence that really resonated with me, that facilitation is a tool and not a title.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, sometimes we carry it as a title because we incorporate it so much in our lives, right?
That's true. And I even heard someone saying facilitation actually is a mindset. It's kind of how you approach the world, which I think, whoa, that's a big one. But yeah, somehow it's how you step into a group and approach a group, or the dynamic of a group, and how much do you let happen versus necessarily always steering or determining. So
what would be for you the core elements of this facilitator's mindset?
I think for me, I think the key item is that it is the unknown of the outcome. Yes, we're kind of steering towards a specific thing, like better collaboration or better something, but we don't put an outcome as such. I mean, yes, we have kind of our desired outcome. What do we want to achieve? But whether we achieve that in that one session, whether it takes a bit longer, because it's the team that kind of defines and co-designs that part. I think that's important for me, and I think it should be very obvious to the client, so that it's, yes, you can do certain things in those 2 hours or in the day or over the 2 days or whatever, but you don't necessarily know whether you will reach that target that he has or they have after a specific time. At least, yeah, that's how I feel.
Absolutely. Also because there's always this grain of uncertainty. You're putting a group of people together, so you never know what happens. And facilitation, I think that's what I think, really focuses on the wisdom of the crowd.
Yeah.
Right? So the group knows already. So the specific output that they will generate,
is
unpredictable.
To a certain extent, it's really unpredictable. Which is great. I think that's the fun part about it as well, at least for me as facilitator, because you can let yourself be surprised. And I think if you translate that correctly up front to the client, then it also becomes more of a positive, because sometimes I think corporate clients, or at least those that I work with mostly, I mean, they want to know, by the end of this day, I will have achieved da-di-da. It's kind of like those KPIs almost, putting against that. And I think if that is more obvious to what it may be or what it may not be, it's also a relief, and probably mostly a relief and kind of a breathing out moment.
Yes. if you're willing to give up this control and lean into this uncertainty.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. And one of your signature tools is play. And we, in our exploration call, decided that the umbrella of today's conversation is playing with intent. And I hear you speaking about corporate clients and KPIs and clear output. Where does play come into play in this context?
Yeah, I think probably not as obvious for the clients maybe as sometimes it is for me. I think especially with corporate clients, play can be very daunting, I think, somehow. And it's just kind of part of that non-serious business or non-seriousness of things. So I don't necessarily tell them that we're playing. It's really more the subtle exercises or activities that we do that that invite them to be more playful. And I think it's I probably phrase it differently as probably not so much as a play, but more as an experiment, or let's try something. You know, let's or also let's fail. I invite you now to fail, because the failing is more part of their speak. So I think, I wouldn't necessarily always say let's play, because they're being surprised or shocked, maybe not surprised, shocked.
Words create worlds, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So by putting it out there, saying, okay, we're playing, then it's, no, we're adults, we're not playing, or we're corporates, we're not playing.
Yeah.
So what does play mean to you then? You mentioned that it means being open for failure, experimenting. Do you need any tools for that, or is it again rather a mindset thing?
I think it can be both. So for me, play mostly is about learning, how I learn, or how I learn to connect with people. So it's not necessarily the learning part as in the training, but really the learn to connect, or the learn to be open, the learn to share, the learn to be vulnerable. So that part of the learning piece, I think, is very much for me in this opportunity to play.
I love that. It reminds me actually of how children learn is through play, or animals learn through play.
Exactly. And I think we're just that, right? We are kind of animals, we are children, hopefully still, and they learn through play. And I think it's that what I'd like to generate, that learning piece. And I think if you as a facilitator have that in mind, and that's probably where the intent comes in, because it's not just that play for the sake of playing, because I think then you will lose the corporates pretty soon. It's not just, oh yeah, let's play taboo. And you think, why ever should I play taboo now? Well, maybe it had something to do with the communications piece that you're doing, or I don't know, but at least it should be that playing with intent, because you want to have a certain outcome, but more in the sense of a certain experience, that they really kind of are more open to share things, or are more curious about each other and how they connect. So that's, I think, for me, what play is about. It's really about the learning aspect.
So does play then always involve a game?
Not necessarily. I think it can also be just a playful exercise and not a game. I mean, the question is, what is a game, right? Is a game where you really have kind of a paper and pen game with kind of like Monopoly or Taboo, where you have certain cards or really a specific tool, or is it also more of a playful exercise? So for me, play doesn't necessarily have to be a specific hardware tool. It can be also a very software exercise thing. I think it's important that it's that openness, that invite to try something.
And Maybe you can give an example, and I would also be curious on how you actually do this invitation without being explicit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think I do use real hardware tools as well. So kind of an example for that would be the emotional culture deck, which I like to work with, which is a set of cards that have emotions on them. And it's also kind of a play because you're using different senses as well. And I think that's also what play can be very much about, not just to use your brain, but also to use maybe more hearing or smelling or touching or some other senses. And I think as soon as the hands have something to do, it's a different level of how you process the world somehow. So that's why I also love kind of hardware plays or games. But the emotional culture deck is a great one because it helps people speak differently about how they feel at work or what they would like to feel. Or Lego series play is a great one because it allows you also to think with your hands, and that's very tangible, and it has to be that hardware. On the software side, I like, especially now that we're going back face to face, I like an exercise either at the beginning or also after lunch, where you kind of stand in a circle and you ask two people to clap their hands at the same time. So you really kind of clap your hands at the same time. And then one starts kind of giving that clap to another person, but you still have to clap at the same time. And that person that receives the clap then has to give that clap to another person, but also, of course, by clapping at the same time. And then so it goes round and round in that circle. And the idea is to start slowly because you need to figure it out, but then also to speed up with the clap. And then the next step is to move freely around the room and still be able to turn and clap with your partner. And it's a great kind of also energizer for the morning or for after lunch or in between as well. But the key thing around that more body playfulness is that you really kind of train the awareness, the presence of the group. How can I make an offer to someone? And is that person open to have that offer of the clap and receive that clap? Or maybe they're looking around something, so I can't give him that clap. Or the clap will be lost in kind of the nirvana. So the rhythm will be interrupted. So it's a great opportunity to debrief, but it's a very playful approach of how can you make people aware of being present or offering something or reading the other people's body of, are they willing to accept the offer? And that's, of course, to be translated back then and debriefed into what does it mean for your team? You know, if someone is not open to accept something, well, then the clap will be lost. It will not land with that person.
Yeah. So this non-verbal communication to see is someone really aware and present.
Yeah. Do they see each other and really in the true sense of seeing? And can they reach out for help? Do they support each other? And that's I probably would call it a game as well, but it's a very software game because you don't need a specific tool. But that's great for face-to-face things, and that's really kind of, especially so kind of how I introduce this, really to just let's get a bit more energetic. Let's pull up the energies after lunch or in the morning. Let's start slowly. Let's start just with a clap and get people involved. So I don't necessarily say, let's play a game.
Yeah, and what I hear is that what adds the intention, the intent is basically the framing and the debriefing. So to put it into a context.
Yes.
So we are doing this why?
Yeah.
We're doing this because we want to make sure that we align, that we listen to each other, that we're aware of each other, that we are embodying our presence.
Yes. And that's the intent that actually is carried onwards very often by the team then throughout the day. Sometimes they come back and say, yeah, you know, that's how the club gets lost or something. So they kind of reference back sometimes to that activity, which is nice, because then you know, okay, it made people think differently about certain things.
And then the playing part is almost like a priming for the participants. So you put them into a certain state of mind and they will pay more attention to this sort of behavior.
Yeah, and that's why I think the intent is important, that you have to think about what does the exercise has to do, or the game that you do, what does it have to do with the day or with the topic of the team? And that's, I think, where, so the intent is, playing with intent is it's my intent that comes in. I need to carefully design that for the group to really make it sync and to really have an impact.
Yeah. And do you think that there's so I understand that there's a broad range of playing. So it can be very subtle, like the clapping game. It might even be more subtle, where it's just about speaking. Mm-hmm. And then you can go into the extremes.
Yeah.
What is the signal from the group or from your client that you would receive in order to balance and to know what is the right degree of playing? How much can I trust them to move onward? And have you ever experienced that someone would say, oh no, I'm not doing that? Yeah. Clapping is for children.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so there are certain different things in your questions, I think. So one is, yes, clapping is for children, Lego is for children. It's sometimes that initial, I'm not doing that. I'm not being paid for doing that, right? Kind of in that sense of, that's not me. And then it's just to extend the invite and say, you know, let's just try. Let's give it a try. Let's see how it goes. I think it's important that, especially if you have kind of a group of people, that everyone takes part. I think that's really important, that you don't have kind of the bystanders that are not involved, because that is kind of that left over, or that child that was never being asked to take part, right? So play is that inclusiveness of get the group involved. And I think that's what I like about play as well. It really needs to involve everyone. And so it has that kind of, it needs to be inclusive in that sense.
Also because, I mean, it makes total sense, because I think the discomfort of playing is that we might feel silly, especially as adults. So if everyone is playing and everyone is silly together, that's kind of okay. But if you suddenly have one observer, then you become aware of your silliness.
Yeah, and it has that status thing as well, right? If one is kind of observing, first of all, you don't have that brave space anymore to feel comfortable, like you say, you know, it's, oh, can I be silly now? He's kind of watching me, but it automatically puts a hierarchy almost in the group of kind of the ones that do the job and the others that are more kind of like the outside observers. I mean, there are role plays, of course, where it's important to kind of have that dedicated observer, but then it's also part of that play, right? To say your role is the observer, and then you feed back to whatever you have seen. But that's a very specific part of the play. But just to say, oh, you know, we do now kind of clap the hands and one say, oh no, I'm out here. Then it's either everyone or you don't do it, or you pivot to something different.
Which is a very interesting part of a group dynamic. Right? So on the one hand, you have the opportunity to also flatten the room, from what I hear. Right? So, okay, we're putting the entire group into this playful moment, and suddenly everyone is the same because everyone is being silly.
Yeah.
And if you have this one, did it ever happen to you that someone would say, I'm not doing that?
No, not yet. Although I just had a group where I thought, ooh, that was probably at the, kind of corporate client at the edge of one person who was kind of a more, let's say, challenging person of the group, where I thought, oh my, maybe that's now the moment where that breaches and that kind of falls over, and then I would just have done something differently, I guess, maybe a less playful thing. So I think it is also coming back to your point, when I do, or how do I prepare the group, etc., or when do I know that I can do it? I think it's really getting to know the group a little bit. So I kind of also do the exploration calls beforehand to have an understanding of every team member and kind of the group. Of course, I speak to the client, which often is the manager, where I would definitely speak to the leader of the group to understand what's the dynamic of the group, how are they. So yeah, so I think it's really coming to that point of how prepared is the group to accept a play. So it hasn't happened that someone kind of declined it, but you have to, or I have to have a certain set of exercises where I judge with the group, is that the right one? Or is it maybe something that is even more experiential, playful? Or is it maybe more of a safe exercise where I know, okay, that will work? So I think that's reading the room as a facilitator as well, reading the group, reading the room. And I prepare, of course, with the kind of, I speak to the manager upfront. I speak to every team member upfront in the exploration calls to understand how are their kind of their minds working, to understand that. But it's really, and also for the manager, it's really important that they take part in that play as much, and probably even as more openly as the other team members. So that's something I also need to align with that client upfront, or at least kind of make them aware that it's a bit, or can be more playful, and how are they thinking about that, etc. Because it's really important that if the team lead is taking part in that group session, and it's not something just with the team members or something, that they really take part and are very, very vocal about, yes, let's do that.
Yeah. And what I hear, and you mentioned it, is they need to feel safe. So there is an aspect of psychological safety so that we can dare to play. Do you think that play is, or what degree of psychological safety as a prerequisite do you need? Or is it even something that you can create through play? Or is it hen and egg, that the more psychological safety you have, the more eager everyone is to jump into play, and therefore they become even more safe?
It's probably hen and egg thing. I think as I mostly work with teams that are already kind of teams, maybe they're newly formed teams, or maybe they're have been working together for a longer time, but it's great creating that safe and brave space in that moment, especially now when we have the pandemic, and it's either they're doing an online session, and it's, although they've been working online for the past 2 years in various kind of constellations, they're one-on-ones, there are team meetings, etc. But doing a workshop online is also very different. And at the same time, also, if they're coming back face to face now, they haven't seen each other for 2 years very often. It also needs to create a new safe and brave space in that moment. So and of course, on top of that comes how newly formed is the group. So are they still in their kind of storming phase, or are they already kind of in their more performing space, in the sense of Tuckman's model? So yeah, you have to consider that, I think, in as you design the session, whether it's playful or not. I think that accounts for every session.
And while you're explaining the different team structures, I obviously think of your brand, which is the texturalists.
Mm-hmm.
So if I understand it correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, different teams have different so-called textures of how they work together. So maybe you can give an example of what are these different textures that you see in teams. And I would be curious then, as a follow-up question, are there specific, do you analyze the texture and then see, oh, for this kind of team, this kind of play fits better than another?
Yeah. So the texture, it's like a team culture. For me, texture is kind of a culture. And I think I like texture, and that's why the texturalists as my business name, because I think it needs to be almost tangible. You have to feel it. You have to feel the culture. You have to almost to be able to touch it. And I think the texture really is it more of a rough one? Is it maybe then more of a competitive team culture? Is it a soft, warm one because you're instantly offering support and reaching out for help, etc.? So I think that texture, and that's where the visual image for me comes in. Is it kind of a woolen blanket, or do you want to feel like a woolen blanket in your team, or do you rather want to feel, I don't know, very airy and light and very independent, and then you have other images and other textures that come into your mind. So for me and the work and how I convey it to the team, it helps to think about a team culture as a texture. How would you like to feel? And again, I think it's hen and egg with, do I create plays because I know the texture, or do I use play and games because I know the texture, or is the texture also created by the means of something playful as an exercise? And also that can be both. Sometimes I know, okay, they are more open and they are laughing and, more of a fun team, so you can do different exercises for them. But also sometimes it helps to try through play to really create that texture for the team. So it's also both, I think.
I love how you explain it and make it tangible, literally. And it seems as if through this approach, then the team can really create an identity, something that they can relate with and maybe refer to even in their communication afterwards. Right? So if they came up with a texture, well, another question. Is a texture something that can be built, or is it something that is inherent already? So it's basically below the surface and the team has to identify it and to bring it forth?
I think that's the same question as, can you create a culture, or can you just kind of use the culture that is there and refine it? And I think with probably every team, you have a certain culture. And I think it's, where do you put the emphasis? How do you zoom in to that culture? And do you then intentionally say, okay, this is maybe a part we want to let go of? So maybe these are kind of the little spikes in your texture that you would like to flatten or to let go of. And do you want then to maybe put more emphasis on the other side? So bringing something else in, or growing something, or looking more into a detailed woolen blanket or something. How is the fiber? I don't know. Depends on what how they want to work together. But I think it's really looking at what there is, and then being very intentional of, okay, where would you like to go?
What I just realized how fluffy the word or the context of culture is, and how you facilitate this conversation through making it more tangible through the texture. Because I was thinking, there's different sorts of silk even, right?
Yes.
So you have the perfect silk that comes out of a factory, and then you have the handmade silk where you have the little mistakes, but they are part of the experience. So to what extent is a team or an organization willing to have these small hiccups or mistakes because it's part of their texture or culture, whatever that means? Or do they want the perfect one?
Yeah, exactly. And also, if we not just think of texture as a fabric, textile texture, but also in nature, like a leaf, kind of a leaf that is starting to unfold. It's still, kind of in a very, very, I don't even know the word for that in English, but when soft and it's still very fragile, but then it unfolds, but you still see kind of all the various veins and little things of the leaf. And also if you put it against light, if you kind of don't put it against light, so how does that also, so I think there are lots of textures out in nature as well that you can use as a symbol, and or which plant is it even? Is it a cactus? Is it a rose? And the rose has the thorn as well. If it's not overly, which I don't know the word in English right now, overly grown. But I think it's also that how would you like to go about as a team? And that aspect helps. And sometimes I do bring in very actively the textures. Sometimes I don't. Again, it also depends on the team and what they need in that moment, just like the play.
Yeah. It almost sounds as if it is a play as such, but also a tool to facilitate the conversation about culture.
Yes.
And then starting even at the first point, oh, now I see the complexity. Are we actually using the metaphor of nature? Because even the leaf, as you explained it, yes, it starts very soft and you can really shape it. So you fold it and it unfolds almost automatically. And then it dries out. And if you try to fold it, it just falls
crumbles.
apart.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and I think it's similar with the play and the playfulness. It has to be that intention behind of using it or of going in a certain direction, and not just putting it on it because I like textures or something, but really kind of making it work for the team and for the customer, just like with the play. I think that's for me the important thing.
Yeah, the metaphor needs to make sense and resonate.
Yeah.
Where do you find your inspiration for playful facilitation?
Oh, I think that's rather easy, to be honest. Well, I'm an theater improv player. So I think like the clap of the hands, that comes from improv, because you need to be very much present on stage and you need to make the offer to your co-player on stage. And if that offer is being lost, then the whole story may be lost or fall apart, or something may not be visible to him, which may be important for you, for your own story that you've thought about. So the clap of the hands, for example, comes from improv, and a lot of ideas and exercises can be used from the world of improv. And there's the whole network of the applied improv network, which is hugely beneficial for my work, because you can really kind of think about how can that be applied to something about trust, or how can you use that for storytelling, etc. So that's really a great network. There are of course great games out there, kind of really tangible games that people pull up. I once created a small game for my previous employer many years ago, a very simple card game about how can you speak about the new values that they had created. And it was really kind of a set of cards with the values and kind of the values and kind of all the various items, and then just open questions, and they should have the discussion kind of draw one of the values and draw an open question and think about what does that have to do with each other. And I think for me, play is the learning and the really having an opportunity to communicate and to share something. And I think there are great games and tools out there, like card games that you can use, or very specific team games. So I think you just have to look, basically, and it's powerful.
Yeah, and then having this open mind to find inspiration from basically your outside life, maybe hobbies that you would bring into the space. You created a card game for your previous employer. So
it failed.
Oh, we love failure.
Yes to failures.
What makes you say that it was a failure, while many say there's no failure, there's only learning?
So well, it was a huge learning.
What is the point of no return where you would say, okay, I can put the label failure on? What happened? What would you do differently?
Yeah, so the reason why we created the game was for the German audience to be able to learn and speak about the new values, to really kind of not just have it as a poster somewhere on the wall, but to really share ideas, learn, discuss, basically. So it was very targeted for the German audience, and it was a beautiful game, and it was, on one hand, it was a success, but the main intention was for the German audience, and that failed completely, mainly because we didn't have the top management in the loop. So the German CEO, when we proposed the game in front of the leadership meeting, the CEO kind of just said, oh yeah, and then there's some sort of game. And he said it in a way that all the other leaders knew, don't touch it. It's not worth it. Don't touch it. And from that moment, it was basically lost. So we really kind of missed the opportunity to bring in key stakeholders first before actually kind of spreading it to the organization. So it was really hardly ever used in Germany, which is really sad. But of course, in Germany, we also already had a very diverse audience. So it was created in German and in English on kind of a dual language edition. And then what was beautiful, and that was kind of the success, which at least kind of lowered the failure a little bit or made it a bit more sweet than bitter, was that other countries from the same organization reached out and said, hey, I've heard you had a great game, and can we have the files, and can we translate it into French and French English and Italian English and Indonesian, whatever. And I was like, yes, of course, here you have the open files, go and produce the game and use it. And so they really liked it. But for the main intention target group, it was a failure.
Wow.
Yeah.
It shows the relevance of leadership.
Yes.
So if they dismiss it from the beginning, it doesn't even have
it doesn't have a chance. Yeah.
And do you think that there's also a cultural component? So maybe the Germans were like, oh, we don't play games, or maybe the German culture that in-house production is not worth it, because this could be another point, right?
I don't think it was necessarily the in-house production. I think it was also, and that it's a very valid point. I probably shouldn't have announced it as a game or as a play. Again, it's coming back to that. Somehow play can be very frightening, or that, hey, I'm a manager, I'm not going to play games here, or I'm not here to play games, or whatever they think. So I think maybe framing it as, hey, this is a great opportunity for discussion with your teams, or this is a great tool. Tool is great. Tools is very, handy. They like tools. They like having tools. So this is a great tool to embed the values and to have that conversation with your team or something. But I think that we missed, first of all, the management and the leader and the top leadership in that. didn't bring them on board, and really kind of made it more of, because I was so happy to have a game. So I think that was kind of just me in my little box, reframing it as a tool for discussion and for learning. I think that would have probably also made a big difference.
Mm. What would you advise someone who is about to launch it? So yes, the reframing or giving it a different name. How would you involve the leadership to really get their engagement or support?
I would probably try and book time with them to experience it, to really say, hey, this is, and probably start with so in corporate world, kind of what's the intended outcome? Coming back from what will that change? What will that experiment change or lead to? So not, because it doesn't matter whether it's a game or not. The intention really is to have that learning or sharing piece or connecting piece or whatever you want to achieve with that. And coming from that side, making it really clear, hey, let's do this in order to learn more about values or whatever it is, or to connect the team or to make the change smoother or whatever it is. So I think I would start from the end, basically. What's the intended outcome, or the intent? What do I want to achieve with this?
Yeah, it reminds me how important it is to have a clear invitation and to stand behind it. And it kind of circles back to what you explained in the beginning, that rarely someone says, no, I don't want to play this. I don't want to do this exercise. And I think it has a lot to do with how the facilitator invites the group to participate. So if you're like, oh, and maybe you want to stand in a circle and clap and let's try that, and maybe it won't work and we do something else, then maybe the groups won't really lean in.
Definitely. That's definitely. And when you kind of, I know that you often ask what will make a workshop fail. And I think that's actually, especially related to play, that's one of the, if you don't believe in the intention of the game and why you're using this particular game, it will fail. Because if you are behind it, you will convey it. It's in your presence as facilitator. And how you invite the people into the exercise. Also, maybe those that are doubtful or more reserved, but how you announce it and invite people, it will be kind of a make or break.
Yeah, and it almost reminds me of the fake it until you make it. Because I imagine when you do it the first time, that's scary, even for the facilitator, right? You made something up in your brain, it makes total sense. And then you have the serious group in front of you and you're like, okay, we're doing this.
And sometimes it can also help to kind of share that vulnerability of saying, hey, I do have a great idea. Don't know yet whether it will work, but help me out here. Help me in trying to find that out. So sometimes it also helps in being very open, depends, of course, on the group, but sharing that vulnerability maybe also helps in failing or making the failure even easier, because they know if they fail, it's not them, it's kind of basically me, which I, of course, then happily take on as a facilitator. And maybe it wasn't even a fail. Maybe it was the intended fail after all. Who knows, right? That's the mystery and the secret of the facilitator.
And then if you can think on your feet as a facilitator, fantastic opportunity to debrief and to learn something about the group dynamics, or why did it fail? Why did the mechanics of this game not work?
Yeah. Yeah. And how can you make that happen next time? Like with my card game, I would never approach it the same way ever again. So, yeah, lots of learnings as facilitator as well.
Yes. And maybe to come back to the card game.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a great experience. And many facilitators might dream of their own cards, and there are a lot of cards out there. So what do you think makes a Oh, what would you advise in the process? How do you even come up with the idea and then implement it?
It's a good question, because at the moment I'm trying to build a new game. So it's a great question. And I think I'm still very early in the process. So I think how I approach it at the moment, at least, it's also, who is this for and why? Why would I want to play this game or this exercise with a team? In which situations? I think it helps to have that clearly in mind. Again, to be intentional about what should be the learning? Should it be about a connection game, how we connect better, or should it be about something around change? Or so I think that should be very clear in the beginning of what's the intended outcome. And then, of course, to continue thinking, kind of, is it for a smaller group? Is it for a bigger group? And then all the rest, I think, will come in with regards to, can it be played online? Is it for face-to-face? Could it be both? Is every aspect of kind of any cultural blind spots potentially included that I may not see? So it's kind of, I think, that reiteration phase, at least that's how I see my game to progress at some point, to play it in various loops with audiences, to see, is it maybe too German-centric or too European-centric, right? Do I really account for other groups to really have that, to use that game? So yeah, but I think you have to come with why would you want to play this game?
Yeah. And it almost sounds like a design thinking process.
Yeah, yeah.
Then empathize with the users. Why would they play it? What is the outcome? And then backward engineer.
Yeah, yeah.
Would you like to tell us more about your game?
Not yet, I think. It's really still in the very early stages. So, but yeah, I definitely would want to create something.
Fair enough. I started to ask a new question to my podcast guests, which is, what is your number one facilitation challenge? Because I think this is something we often don't speak enough, that even experienced senior facilitators do face challenges.
Oh, definitely. I think the challenge for me in teams is always, or maybe, well, not always, but one challenge definitely is those participants that are more on the negative side of their mindset, let's say, or of their approach to the topic, whether it's in their kind of nature and they're kind of more looking at things from the glass is half empty, or whether it's they don't understand the purpose of this meeting, or they don't support it, or they don't like the manager, they don't like the team members, etc. But all those resistance levels that a participant may have and bring into the group, and then disrupt or interrupt or destroy the group dynamics, that is a challenge. How do I, of course, at best, really involve them and get their buy-in, or at least help navigate them and the group through that process of, it's okay that it's okay to agree to disagree. It's okay not to be fully supportive, but maybe it also means that you don't completely go against everything, because the group may like doing it.
Yeah.
So that balance of, and I think it's also a balance of how much focus does that one team member get versus the attention on the others. And I spoke a few weeks ago with a client, and he actually came up with a great comparison. It's like the comedian on stage, and he is in front of an audience, and the audience is great, and they clap and they are supportive and everything. And he sees one person in the front row who does not laugh and does not clap. So does he pivot his show to make that one person happy, while maybe losing all the rest of them? or is he playing for the rest of them and hopefully pulling up that one person into, oh yeah, maybe I do like it if everyone else likes it. And I think somehow it's, at least that's how I approach it in kind of my thinking. I do it for the group. And yes, I try to include that person, but not just putting that sole focus on that one person, because otherwise I might lose the whole group.
Yeah. And you basically empower that person to hijack.
Yes, because I give him focus, I give him attention, and then he will maybe have that more as an invite to even go bigger against everything else. So don't play kind of the show for that one person in the front row who doesn't laugh. Play it for the ones that do laugh and do clap.
I love that. It's such a good analogy. And then, so what makes me think of is it's an inner game of the facilitator. So where do we put our attention to? And then very often where we put our attention to, that's what the stuff that grows, right? So maybe also putting too much attention to the disruptor will even make it stronger for some sort of a group dynamic.
Yes.
And it brings up the question of responsibility. So who is responsible actually for the outcomes and the flow of a session? Is it only the facilitator? Is it the entire group? Is it every individual? How would you deal with that? Or how can you?
I think it's I think it's definitely not just the facilitator. I think it's, I mean, I can do certain things and provide the space for certain things, and of course I play a part in that, but I think it's the willingness of the group to do things, and that, yes, that can be encouraged and enhanced. In a regular training, I always say that in the beginning of kind of, hey, I can make the offers, but it's up to you to decide how much you would like to learn and to take out of this. And maybe I should start doing that with the team as well. I don't know. I haven't tried it with the classic facilitation. I rather use it with training where it's really dedicated to learning. But I think it depends on the group how much they would like, and that can unfold and evolve from being more skeptic of what do we need to expect, how does this happen, how does this work, to, oh yeah, that's great.
And giving agency to the individuals. And maybe just the priming of, I'm thinking out loud, making them aware that every individual carries the responsibility. And it reminds me, who said that? Oh yes, I read it in the book, The Big Leap. He says in a relationship, both carry 100% of the responsibility. So it's not a shared responsibility with 50-50 where
that's
you can
beautiful.
lean back. And actually for a team, it's similar in a workshop, right?
Yeah.
Every participant has 100% responsibility.
Yeah. And that's a good point, because it's also sometimes the team then kind of puts the responsibility on the manager or the team lead, right? It's not them, it's everyone. It's really everyone.
Yeah. It reminds me of a situation. I had a challenging workshop where this one disruptive person was actually the
manager,
hippo.
Oh, okay.
The highest paid person in the room. And from moment one, just you could see it from the body language, totally disengaged, not liking communication, participation, interaction.
Wow. Yeah.
And
so what did you do?
I first tried to engage him and hear, okay, what do you need to lean in and to fully engage and to surrender, maybe, although it might be uncomfortable. So trying to throw the ball to him and involve. And when I realized that this wouldn't work, I put my attention to the group, as you just explained. And still, it does have an impact on the dynamics, especially if it's someone in the leadership position.
Yes. That also goes back to the same feeling with the card game, right? if the hippo doesn't support, it's more difficult.
And I think in those situations, it's even more important to have an idea of identifying them beforehand.
Yeah.
So with this specific person, this specific situation, we didn't have a one-on-one exploration call.
I think that's so important. And I learned it from you. So thanks for that, because I think it's so valuable to have it with the manager, but also, and I usually have it with the manager because they kind of ask for my support, but to also really have it with every person in the team. That is so helpful to either understand there's a different elephant in the room than maybe the manager sees the elephant, or to just understand how they are. Are they more reserved? Are they more outgoing? Are they eager to share? Are they more introverts, right? And maybe you need to include more think and write exercises or something. Or with regards to play, do I think they are more open to play or maybe less open to play, etc.? So that's so helpful.
Absolutely. And in this situation, the team members joined the call. Mm-hmm. And I had a gut feeling that this might not be the right thing. And my bad, I didn't have the guts to say, you know what, please everyone leave the room, we have a one-on-one conversation. Because I think to create for them the opportunity to raise, okay, this is what I don't like. For me to say, okay, we're going to do it anyway. If it's more kind of the intimate sharing or warm-up exercise or breakout sessions, and then how can we together make it work? Or maybe even give the person then a very explicit role of, okay, you can be the disruptor. But then play it out.
Play it out. Be intentional about it, right? I mean, also with teams where there is maybe a difficulty between manager and team, I think it also helps then to have an exercise separate for the manager and have the team just be able to openly share. If that trust level is not there yet in the beginning, and to understand really what is this about, how can we approach it, and it's also helpful to sometimes say, okay, we go separate, and then we come back together again. But it has. I like more those that are together anyway, because they want to work jointly on something. But the
best case scenario.
We just want best case scenarios, right? Oh, beautiful.
But then on the other hand, it takes away this uncertainty that we started our conversation with. True. Where actually the magic then happens, because we can never be certain of how things will go.
Yeah. True.
Nice.
Yeah, so fun to speak about those things.
Yes. I had a question and I lost it.
Maybe.
So we spoke about the intention, play, different sorts of play. That play doesn't need to be a game or a card game. It can even be appointing a role to a participant or to the manager beforehand. Would you call yourself a playful facilitator?
I don't use it as openly as probably there are other facilitators out there that really use that word, playful facilitator or facilitation playfulness or workshops or whatever. I don't, mainly because I think it frames people's ideas around things. So I think if you already, at least for me, that's how I see it, and so it wouldn't work for me. But if I have it as a playful facilitator, I would probably expect there is so much play. And maybe that play for me is sometimes even then more hidden for groups. Like I said before, maybe it's not obvious for the team that they're doing a bit more playful exercise. But if you're announced as a playful exercise, I would feel pressured to just do playful exercises all the time. And of course, the question is, how playful is doing a starfish, for example, of start, stop, continue, do more of, do less of, etc. Is that already playful to certain groups? Probably it is, but maybe because it's something new or something. But I wouldn't necessarily call that playful. But kind of clap your hands, that's for me more playful, but it's just one element. So my sessions don't just add playful activities after playful activities. It's really also that intentional, does it work here? Is it the right energy? Is it the right time? And so I wouldn't say, or like Lego Serious Play, I'm a Lego Serious Play facilitator, but I do so much more and so often more sessions than Lego Serious Play sessions. It's really a small portion, yet it still helps to have that. But I wouldn't call myself, I'm just a Lego Serious Play facilitator, because I sometimes use it, but not all the time.
You just said something that really resonated, is the energy. And it sounds almost like you can use play to regulate the energy in the room, to add some more, or to calm it a little bit down. So to have a toolbox of different games or playful exercises, in air quotes, to check the temperature and the energy in the room, and then to infuse or to reduce.
And you do, right? I mean, if you kind of look for energizers, I mean, that's all about kind of getting the energy up. And that's usually rather playful. So I think many of us, although we may not call ourselves playful facilitators or using much play, but I think to a certain extent, you use things like energizers after lunch, or when you think, oh, it's good to kind of just, I don't know, empty your head or something. So yes, I think you can play with that. And I think depending on kind of team games where it's maybe more of a challenge and you think, yes, you know, it's a kind of a more performing team. So maybe a challenge is better for the ones than for others who may be more about, okay, let's rather share and discuss. And that's maybe a playful approach that's needed for them then. So yeah, I think you need to look with your intention, or with the intent, what group is it and what energy level is it overall and in that moment.
And what just crossed my mind, coming back to the playful facilitator, somehow when I think of a playful facilitator, I imagine lots of colors, lots of silliness, maybe even some costumes, which is different from a facilitator who uses play as a tool or serious games as a tool. And then I realized that even in the translation, it might be difficult. So saying playful in English and spielerisch in German has a different connotation to it.
Yeah, that's probably true. And I think it's great that there are those, you know, colorful and with costumes, and they will have their and find their clients and their audiences who exactly need that person. And that's why I think it's great that we have so many ways and styles of facilitation, because how I do it, and I think my playfulness maybe is more visible in, I don't know, how I communicate or what I share on LinkedIn, or I don't know, maybe it's not visible at all. I don't know. But I think a different person's playfulness is in a different way explicit and visible. And that's great. And that's why we don't necessarily compete for the same client with the content, but also with our styles of, they can expect certain things from a colorful costume facilitator. And they can expect certain things from me, although we may both work on team collaboration, for example. So I think it's very much also, are you looking for the right type of facilitation?
Yes. And what I hear is, find a way that is authentic to you.
Yeah.
Because if I would start with costumes and like I wouldn't be credible. And,
Yeah, me
and
neither.
maybe getting back to what we discussed earlier, then the invitation that I'm speaking out to the group wouldn't be credible. And then I might lose them and thereby risk the workshop.
Yeah. Yeah, and same for me, absolutely. I think I'm also not going out to customers and say, hey, I'm playing with intent. Would you like to play along? It's really for me to say, hey, how can I make that learning for whatever it is more playful? And sometimes, of course, there is kind of that way when I have to involve the customer and saying, oh yeah, let's do Lego series play. And it's, kind of explaining a little bit more, but if it's just a playful exercise, I may not tell them in advance that it's a playful exercise just for the reasons we had. But I think it has to be you. You have to be the authentic one, whether it's play or whether it's I don't know, anything else that comes in there.
Makes total sense. And what would be your advice to a facilitator who wants to test the grounds to bring in more play into their facilitation? What is the easiest first step?
I think the easiest first step is also to look on for exercises like on Session Lab, for example, where they have tons of exercises and some are more playful than others. I think that's a good resource. And take part in things like the NDB, the Never Done Before, where you have so many different approaches also to play and to experiment. Or share it in the community, ask for your community within the community for games. And just by searching, I think, team collaboration game, I think you will find so many exercises and not just hardware games, but really kind of the software games as well, of kind of, you don't need a specific tool or game, board game or something, but really kind of exercises. And start trying them out and see what you like and how you feel doing them, and whether it fits for your customer and for your team or group that you facilitate the session for.
This makes total sense. Thank you so much, Susanne.
Thank you, Miriam. It was a joy.
Yes. And let's go out and play.
Yeah, with intent.
With intent, with a learning goal in mind.
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dum, da, da, dum. End of the podcast.